Welcome into the Fun Astrology Podcast. Thomas Miller with a special edition. We're going to be talking with none other than Stephen Forrest, a man who to any astrologer is no stranger whatsoever, but so that you get a wee little bit of context, he first had an astrology book placed in his hands when he was about 17 years old while he was recovering from a tonsillectomy back then. They did that. They took our tonsils out. Mine are gone. And the cool thing about it is he got to read an astrology book. I got to eat ice cream. Well, whoever that doctor is that suggested that procedure, the world could thank him over and over because that began the astrology exploration for this amateur astronomer who now put his eyes on how we interpret what he was seeing through the telescope. Stephen calls his approach to astrology evolutionary astrology, simply the evolution of our soul. How many of you have stared into a chart and said, "Why am I here?" Well, it's all of the embellishment as you go all the way around that 12-section wheel that Stephen has dedicated his life to answering. For years, he taught his style to thousands of people around the world, literally in multiple continents, as he traveled to them. This was all pre-pandemic. Then he noticed a significant astrological signature in his own chart. In his early 70s, his secondary progressed moon was entering the 12th house, where you could say endings and completions, new beginnings as it moves into the first house again. And then COVID put a punctuation mark on that plan when it shut the world down, and all of a sudden the apprenticeship program that he had been conducting concluded according to his chart and according to what was going on in our world. And as synchronicities have it for guys like Steve, there were two people in his life who he mentions in the episode standing right at the door to help him cross into the first house with a new project, which is now the Forrest Center for Evolutionary Astrology. So many of you are interested in learning astrology at various levels, and that's what we're going to talk about today. Why the evolutionary path and various ways that you can learn to be more proficient in your own astrological practice. And then in 2019, he granted me one of the high points of my life to narrate his legacy project, which was written during the COVID years. It's called the Elements series. Pretty self-explanatory, written from the perspective of fire, earth, air, and water, each volume building on the one before and yet standing on its own two legs, getting progressively thicker through the series, nearly 2,000 pages of his life's work. That was committed to audiobook, so it is something that really is a reference guide that should be on any serious astrologer's library shelf. And it also should be plugged into your ears so that the themes that Steve Forrest teaches are embedded into your own subconscious. So now our interview with Stephen Forrest, beginning with, what is evolutionary astrology?
The word evolutionary contains a whole lot of information here, but at the simplest level, there's the basic tension between reality as we experience it on one hand and reality as it is described in most astrology books. Now, in most astrology books, you will get information such as you're a Gemini, so you talk too much, would be the simplest kind of explanation, or a more sophisticated, in quotes, kind of astrology, where you have a moon-Pluto square, and so you had big issues with your mother, which, may be accurate. But see, the point is, Geminis can learn how to shut up, and sometimes they do, and they realize that their lives go better if it's a conversation rather than a monologue. And people with serious mother issues work on themselves and are no longer defined by those issues. And these are sort of common sense observations about reality, and they boil down to the idea that we are capable of evolution. It's not exactly guaranteed. We have to make a little effort, but we can change. And so when I speak of evolutionary astrology, it's about an astrology that encourages people to improve over time, to heal their souls, to reach their highest potentials, In the background, philosophically, of evolutionary astrology, we also make the assumption that we're all a whole lot older than our birth certificates might suggest, that we are ancient souls evolving through a succession of lifetimes. So lifetime after lifetime, we are evolving. And we own that metaphysical perspective unabashedly. But the drum I really like to beat is we're not just evolving lifetime to lifetime, we're evolving minute to minute. And that's really where evolutionary astrology comes into play.
Wow. So it's that granular.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Minute to minute, probably nanosecond to nanosecond, but I don't claim to be able to see that. But I speculate that, you're not the same person you were 1 nanosecond ago.
You gave me the green light to narrate the Book of the Moon, which I really appreciate because I'd been kind of holding back a little bit. I'm a little bit of a Steve Forrest fanboy, I got to admit.
Well, thank you.
But yeah. I totally respect what you've done, not only in life, but for astrology. But I want to thank you for the Book of the Moon. And then what you're saying is there would be a big signature right there of that nanosecond to nanosecond, because that's the fastest moving thing we've got.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the moon does everything it can possibly do in your chart in 27 days and 8 hours. So it just repeats and repeats and repeats. And we have thousands of moon cycles in a typical lifetime. And the moon is heart and soul energy. It's the mood of your life, and so we all understand that one day we're feeling kind of optimistic, and another day we're feeling maybe sad or reclusive, which is not the same as sad. But the ever changing flux of mood or attitude is something we all experience universally. And it is, once you understand astrology, you can follow the moon's passage through the signs, the houses of your chart, its conjunctions with the planets. And it simply, I don't want to say the moon causes our emotions, but the moon reflects them. It's a phenomenon of synchronicity. There's a synchronization between the passage of the moon around your chart and your inner state. It's really pretty obvious when you start to look for it.
I'm coming into this conversation with you from a reading that I just did, and that was so special. And the lady that I was talking to was 70. She was about to have her 70th birthday. And she was asking, what's still going on? And I pulled from the Elements series books, I pulled a couple of examples and talked about the second Saturn return and how we choose our later years.
Yeah.
How have you seen this evolutionary journey of astrology affect people's lives? Because she was just lit up after hearing that.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Thanks for sharing that. The story you tell first, just very subjectively, it makes me really happy, because the purpose of astrology is not to amaze people, but to help them, to serve their souls. And so I love it when somebody takes work that I've done, my books or the classes or my school or something like that, and they take it and actually internalize it, learn it, and then begin to offer it to their communities. And it comes up in the end with stories like you just told. Here's this woman, 70 years old, and getting older, you start to wonder, what was it all about? A lot of people lose their sense of purpose and sort of rot in front of a television as they get older. And that's not what life is about. And astrology can help somebody avoid that by giving them a sense of what their own purpose is. And the thing I love about this, we can take broad principles in life, like be kind to animals, or eat your vegetables, take care of yourself. Statements like that are good advice. Actually, they apply to everybody, and everybody benefits from listening. But where astrology comes in is like the next step. So what's going to help you personally find meaning in your life. And what works for you might not work for me. And what works for you might not be obvious to you. And thus you might feel lost. And the astrologer can come into the equations and offer suggestions and say, try this. In a sense, it's, trust me, take this pill and call me on Tuesday, but, see if it works, taste and see. And the stuff works. We can restore a personal sense of meaning and direction to people, regardless of what their age is. Old age has its challenges, God knows, but so does youth. I love doing readings for people, let's say well into their teens. Before that, it's kind of hard for me to make the connection. But somebody 16, 17, I sure wish I had a good reading when I was that age and just kind of aim my nose in the right direction.
I was going to mention that. The note I made is the other spectrum of the timeline, back to the beginning, right? Yeah. And especially helping parents teach their children the evolutionary journey.
Yes. Because poor parents, I've never been a parent myself. It's one of the great ironies of my life. My whole life is built around births, the birth chart. I've never seen a birth, and never had any intimate personal involvement with a birth in my whole life. But it's thinking of being a parent. So full of hard choices. Like, for example, the 10-year-old says, I want to sleep in a tent in the backyard with my best friend. Okay, well, a 10-year-old out in the backyard in a tent, there are certain potential dangers and, certain risks. And should we let the kid sleep in the backyard or should we not? What's the right parental move? And I don't want to have dinner with anybody who's got a quick answer because it's truly complicated. And then throw in astrology. This would be simple astrology, but it will make the sophisticated point. And that is, let's say your kid is an Aries, the sign of the warrior. And what his soul is about in this lifetime is one of the things is learning about courage. And he's out there at 2:00 in the morning and he's a little scared. Why did I ever ask, mommy and daddy for permission to do this? But he's wrestling with fear, which is to say he's learning courage. And you've just supported your kid by saying yes. On the other hand, and again, this is very simplified astrology, maybe that kid is a Cancer and much more inherently cautious and oriented to the safety of family and eventually creating a family of his or her own. And the kid is saying, can I sleep in that tent in the backyard? Secretly hoping you will say no, because, they're asking only to save face with their friend rather than because they want it. And then the wise parent, kindly says, no, I forbid that. And the kid breathes a sigh of relief. I mean, this is almost cartoonish astrology. But it does make the point that there aren't one-size-fits-all answers to the basic problems of life, beyond a few basics like thou shalt not kill and things like that. Beyond that, it's all completely individual. And this is where I'll get in trouble with this line. This is where astrology is better than religion, because religion will often give you a one-size-fits-all answer for how you should behave. Astrology says, no, you're a specific, unique soul who's reached a certain stage in the evolutionary journey. And here are the experiences that are going to feed you.
Well, I think from the chorus and throngs of people listening to this podcast, you just heard a hearty amen, brother.
I hope so. Or they're listening to the wrong podcast. And then maybe they'd be happier with another podcast. Get rid of this Thomas Miller and Stephen Forrest. Maybe they need to hear somebody, preaching to them.
Well, okay, so what we're moving toward here then is the old classic line. Do you give someone a fish or do you teach them to fish?
Yes.
And you, for years, have been teaching people to fish, but you were doing it in geographic areas around the world.
Yeah.
And now we had a pandemic, and we're all getting older, and you decided to move that to an online or at least some delivery where it could be scaled.
Yeah.
And tell them about now the school, the Forrest Center of Evolutionary Astrology.
Yes. Forrest with two R's, Center for Evolutionary Astrology .center, and there we are. It's actually forrestastrology.center is the website. The school is it's a serious trade school for learning my techniques of astrology. That's a pretty succinct statement of it. It's not a university. Astrology is a big tent. There are many, many different forms of astrology. Hindu astrologers use an entirely different zodiac, for example, than the Western astrologers do. God bless us one and all. But in the FCEA, our attempt is to get across the techniques that I've personally developed without condemning anybody else. But it's like, here's a method that will work for you and will take you soup to nuts. Will take you from zero to professional level mastery in 3 or 4 years. A student can pace their course through the school at their own rate. There are some options, but 3 or 4 years to achieve mastery. And at the end of it, you'll be able to use the methods that I've developed and sit with an absolute stranger, nothing but the date, time, and place of their birth, and say helpful, accurate things to them. And that's really the entire aim of the school. It was interesting, as you mentioned, geographical places. I used to teach all around the world. I had my astrological apprenticeship program, which ran for about 20 years. A couple of thousand people went through it. Big success and a lot of fun and a real family. And we had a couple of places, 3 places in the U.S. and North Carolina, 2 out here in California. Taught in Italy, taught in Australia. I taught in China, and I would visit these places once or twice a year and teach a 4 or sometimes 5-day seminar. It was pretty intensive, and again, I did it for 20 years. I was getting older, as we all are, and awful tired, not of teaching, but of flying. Just it's grueling to have an international schedule of flights that's that dense each year. And I looked at my chart and I realized it was time to start putting an end to things. I was getting ready for a new beginning, moon passing through the 12th house by progression. And so I began to wind down these programs, and that felt really right to me. And then synchronistically, right in the midst of that winding down, along comes COVID. And so that definitely finished the winding down process. And right during that period, I connected with a couple of people, Jeff Parrott and Katie Cadge specifically, who were able to help me establish this online school. Jeff had the technical knowledge and financially helped us out. And Katie, who's now the dean of the school, has 30 years as an art professor in a California college and understood online modalities of education. So we were quite a team. And so the apprenticeship programs ended. COVID sort of erased them. And next thing we knew, we had this online school that opened at the end of 2020.
Well, I know it was well-founded, and it's become successful, like anything that a good Capricorn would do, right?
Right.
Would ensure. All
Never
right.
stop working.
Yeah, exactly. But we are coming into this era where Pluto is going to be in Aquarius for probably the rest of your life and mine.
Yeah.
That also Aquarius is symbolic with astrology. So what do you think? I mean, as people think about, now, why would I invest in an education in astrology like this? You're not talking about months, you're talking about years. This is a commitment. Mm-hmm. But you are going to be so well trained in this. I mean, I look at it the same way you do. It's the life and path of our soul.
Yeah.
Why would somebody invest in that? And then what do you see over the hill a little bit do you see astrology becoming more popular and thus more of a centerpiece of conversation and more of a demand for people to, hey, right now give me a fish, but ultimately I want to learn to fish?
Yes. Yes. Well, they're welcome. Give us your tired, your hungry, your poor, and your huddled masses. It's astrology and Aquarius. Yes, there's a real connection there. Aquarius is about the process of individuation, just figuring out who you are as distinct from who everybody else wants you to be. And that's like right up the main hallway of astrology. That it is about helping people individuate. The explosion in the popularity of astrology, however, is well underway. And Pluto touched Aquarius briefly earlier this year, but long before that, it's hard to put a date on it. 5 or 6 years before that, we began to see this incredible upswing in the popular acceptance of astrology, interest in astrology. I think the generations that didn't believe in it are dying off, and they're getting replaced by younger people. And these younger people have been raised in an environment in which the astrologers were simply better, simply more skillful. And it's just been a very happy synergy that's led to this incredible explosion, this sort of doubling in the level of interest and acceptance. I think Pluto entering Aquarius will continue to be good for astrology. I think it's a viable profession. Somebody joins my school. There's lots of other ways to become an astrologer, but somebody joins my school, and as you say, 3 or 4 years, it's a serious commitment. But that's like law school or medical school, or at least getting a master's in psychology and becoming a kind of social work psychotherapist. It's the same. Different material, but equivalent level of seriousness, professionalism, effort, and demands. We don't give the wimps the degree. You got to really want it. A weekend workshop does not certify you, and so we're kind of claiming our dignity as professionals as well. And as we believe in ourselves that way, of course, others tend to believe in ourselves that way. A drum I've been beating for a long time, and I think maybe some are starting to listen. I've done many astrological talks, of course, at conferences, and generally, I get a round of applause. People like what I'm saying, typically. One time, I did a talk that was not very well received at all. I'm going to be a little obscure about where this was to protect the guilty, but in this talk, I was talking about astrology as a profession and how important it was that it be taken seriously as a profession. And so I was talking, not boasting, but talking honestly about my income level, and just to make the point that this is not a hobby, and if your kid wants to be an astrologer and your kid wants to go to astrology college, instead of cosmetology school or getting a PhD in English literature, mom and dad, this is a smart choice for your kid. Your kid can make a living. This doesn't mean your kid is going to be still living in the bedroom at 37. And so just quoting my own levels of prosperity, which are basically like a successful psychotherapist, it's essentially where my income is. And it was amazing how many people thought, I was sort of lowering the bar by, sullying the subject of astrology with the tawdry subject of actually making a living at it. It was appalling. But if we want to take ourselves seriously as a profession, that's part of it. And you can make a living as an astrologer, and you won't have a boss except yourself. Allow me to recommend it if you're a self-starter, and if you love people and you're willing to, be up to here in the muck of human suffering, divorce, and anger, and it's like a psychotherapist's life. but it's a good life. It's a meaningful life.
And the path you're talking about is the path toward the counseling room, obviously, and engaging with others and looking at their charts and giving them the advice that you've learned and been trained in. Let me ask it this way, and this is kind of a dual question, because also on that same website, your Forrest Astrology website, you have a plethora of recordings, videos, audios, publications, etc., that also can contribute. And in fact, the Elements series that we put on thank you for letting me put that on audio with you, I'm sure has become a core curriculum in the school.
Yes.
Because that's your life legacy work dumped into just under 2,000 pages. So if the mom out there with 3 kids is so busy that she can't think or right now fathom of, 3 or 4 years and a big commitment, but still wants to learn to fish, what would you suggest?
Well, that pretty much what you just said, that she has other options. For lots of reasons, people would not be able to make the full commitment to the school. Differences of learning, I guess, is the subject. Learning styles. I like to learn by reading, and I've written 16 books, and of course there are many other astrologers who've written very wonderful books, and one can learn the system that way, just simply by reading. Other people prefer to hear the spoken word, and as you say, on my website there's a huge library of audio and video recordings of me teaching on various subjects. A lot of them are free. Many of them are not free, of course, because you have to keep the wolf from the door. But I shouldn't say this, but I will anyway. A lot of my books have been shamelessly stolen by scoundrels and pirates and are available all over the internet. And if some single mom with 7 children wants to learn astrology, with my blessing, go ahead and steal my books from the pirate sites and listen to my free videos on my website. You can learn a lot about astrology for nothing, if you want to. And obviously I have somewhat mixed feelings about that, but the bottom line is the whole purpose of my life has been getting this work out there, and I don't want it to be economically exclusive.
Yeah, great point. Great point. What a wonderful resource. And I'm so glad that you had that progressed son, and quite honestly, that you used the pandemic the way you did. You made the best of it.
Thank you. Thank you.
Steve, thanks for telling us about it. And thanks for all you've done for this wonderful craft.
Well, you're welcome. You're welcome. Thanks for having me on the show.
Always a privilege, always a pleasure. And you can't get around the man that you don't learn something. And what a gift to have him leave it all behind for the next generation. I will leave in the show notes links to the school, to his website, and to the Elements series. I always like to say that Audible makes it look like you have to have a subscription to buy his books, but you don't. You can do it just one-off, and you can also, if you're on Apple or iTunes, you can buy it through Apple Books now is what it's called, but you do not need a subscription to either. You can pick them up just individually. And I'm working now on the Book of the Moon, written by Stephen Forrest, and when we finish that, I'll bet we can twist his arm to come back and do this again. Thank you, Steve. Appreciate you. Have a wonderful weekend. Thank you so much for listening.